Hello everybody, this is Refresh, and I'm here to take a look at the Faerie Schemes Brawl deck for Magic the Gathering. Brawl is an exciting multiplayer format in which each deck is built around a powerful legendary creature planeswalker, and Faerie Schemes says, Alela is uncommonly patient for a fairy, favoring grand schemes over petty mischief. Control the board with artifacts and enchantments to quietly amass an advantage until you seize the win out of nowhere. It includes a 60-card Brawl deck, life wheel, deck box, and an informational insert. Let's go ahead and see what's inside. Here's our Alela Artful Provocateur. For 1 white, black, and blue, you get a legendary creature, Fairy Warlock, with flying, death touch, and lifelink, and other creatures you control. With flying, get +1/+0. Whenever you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying, and she is a 2/3. You also get this informational pamphlet, and so it gives you some information about the different decks. On the back it tells you a little bit more about Brawl and the format and how to build a Brawl deck, and then a quick rules reference of what you can do during play. And this is a format that's very much like Commander, but with a standard rotating style as opposed to in Eternal format. We get a deck box. Looks like it can hold a sleeved deck. There's a spacer in here. We also get a life counter, a card divider, which I'm not sure what you'd use for, maybe to divide Alela, and then we have the deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. Alright, and that is the deck. I'll go ahead and play this against its peers, and I'll be back to let you know what I think. Okay, so I've had a chance to play with this deck a bit, and here are my thoughts. The first thing is that we have to take a look at Alela to really see what this deck is trying to do. It is working on both of Alela's main themes here, so we have other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0, and when you cast an artifact or enchantment spell, create a 1/1 blue fairy creature token with flying. And so it's doing both things. So this deck is a Flyers Matters deck, and so Alela actually creates flyers and pumps the flyers by giving them +1/+0, and it has a small number of flyers here that work with the +1/+0. But most of the flyers that you're going to get are actually going to be as a result of you casting artifacts or enchantments. That's the second theme of the deck. There are a couple cards that happen to have both things going on, like the Arcanist Owl is both a flyer and an artifact, and so it triggers the bottom half while also benefiting from the top half. But a lot of the deck is just one or the other. And I think for the most part the deck works on that level, but there are some weaknesses here, and there are ways that the deck could be vastly improved. So let's talk about some of the things that it does well. The Flyers theme is actually fairly well supported here. Thanks to the Empyrean Eagle pumping the flyers, you have the Shine Chaser, which is very much like Alela in that it cares about having artifacts and enchantments, but it's also a flyer on top of that. The Animating Fairy is also a great inclusion because it turns one of your many non-creature artifacts into an artifact creature and is itself a flyer. The Shambling Suit is an artifact that cares about artifacts and enchantments because it grows as a result of that as well. And then Workshop Elders does kind of what the Animating Fairy does as well. And Sephara Skysblade is a flyers boss, so it turns all your flyers into indestructible creatures. And you can speed it out if you've generated enough flyers already. With this deck, you're mostly trying to get Alela down as soon as possible, and then generate value off of her ability to create 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens. Some of the things that work really well with this, the latter half, are, as you can see, the deck is primarily non-creature spells, and there's a lot of them over here. They all do something or other. There's a bit of ramp in the Arcane Signet, the Mana Geode, the Heraldic Banner, some fixing in the Guild Globe and the Golden Egg, some card draw, Chemister's Insight, Winged Words, which also plays with a flying theme, and Smothering Tithe is a great ramp card. It's going to give you a lot of treasures which you can use to power out additional spells. And then there's some payoffs at the end. All that glitters will turn one of your creatures huge with that. And you also have a surprisingly decent Mace of the Valiant, which I thought was going to be a joke, but the fact that it gets a +1/+1 counter and is hard to interact with whenever you create a blue fairy creature token, because it's not when you cast it, it's when it enters the battlefield. It gets bigger and bigger, and then you just equip it on the fairies and just start flying in. So this is actually not bad. Another really good card in this deck is the Heraldic Banner, because it gives a power bonus to all creatures of a certain color, and because you create 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens, which turn into 2/1 blue fairy creature tokens. With the Heraldic Banner, they become 3/1 blue fairy creature tokens. And so those are all really good things about this deck. Even the choice of removal in most cases is enchantment-based removal. So we have a Frogify, Law Mage's Binding, Prison Realm, Conclave Tribunal. All those will also trigger Alela as well. And then the deck has a couple Wraths in here. We have the Kaya's Wrath as well as Massacre Girl as both ways of recovering should your opponents take the battle out of hand. And I found that Banished into Fable, while it is a little bit expensive and clunky, it actually does, in the right situations, manage to do things. I don't love it, but it can bounce 3 things and then give you 3 2/2 White Knight creature tokens with Vigilance. And that's not bad either. The Blood-Soaked Altar, I think, is interesting. You can basically turn your fairies into demons by losing a little life and discarding cards. I don't know if that's the best value, and so I don't love that in this deck, but I understand what it's doing here. And all this comes together to make this deck pretty good. Alela was one of the decks that was able to win in the free-for-all with all of these Brawl decks that I played. I think my biggest issues with the deck is actually the mana base, but that's going to be true for all of these Brawl decks because it's a real budget mana base. We have all 3 Guild Gates and all 3 Game Lands that are in the colors of Alela. And then we have a Command Tower, which is great, and then an Emergence Stone, which is kind of annoying because it's colorless and there's, you want colors here. And then the 2 extra super good lands that we have here are Watergrave, which is great. Having a shock land in this deck is great, and we also have a Temple of Silence. One of the first things that I would do to upgrade this deck is just to get rid of some more of these basics and replace them with more temples and more Watergraves if you're going to kind of stay within the space of Throne of Eldrain legality Brawl decks. And that would help this to feel a lot better because, getting stuck on mana is not a happy thing. And then eventually maybe you can even remove the Guild Globe and Golden Eggs and replace them with, cards that are actually working towards the game plan a little bit better than just trying to fix. I think the deck's All-Stars have proven to be Smothering Tithe for one, as well as Alela, and rightfully so. And not all of the cards work extremely well. Like as far as removal goes, things like Law Mage's Binding and Frogify, they have some limited utility. I think Frogify is a little better than Law Mage's Binding actually, because Frogify will turn off the abilities of other players' commanders, and so that actually has a more interesting effect than Law Mage's Binding. But as far as single target removal goes, we have some decent options here. So I feel that Alela Artful Provocateur's deck as a Brawl deck is actually pretty good overall. I think that thematically it does work really well. I would hope that the mana base can get upgraded, and then you can change out some of the cards that are here to support the deck's weaknesses for cards that actually move the deck closer towards its endgame. Elsewhere you get the deck box, which is fine. It's just, a cardboard deck box. It fits sleeved cards, which is great, and then I think that, the divider here is kind of interesting. I guess I'm just using it to separate Alela from the rest of the deck. And then we have the life tracker, which I think is fine. This is a fine life tracker. It does what you need it to do. I don't like that you have to flip it over to get to the other half of the life, but I do appreciate that it goes at least up to 40, because then you can use it as a commander life tracker. Although, I would like this to be even bigger and get even higher life, so that in case you gain some life or something, it goes even higher than that. Interestingly enough, that one of the biggest criticisms I have for this deck is that it doesn't have the tokens that you need. Like, there are no fairy tokens in here, there's no night tokens in here. The deck generates tokens, but you have to find your own tokens basically. And I think that one of the things that this deck really could have used is just putting all the tokens that you might need in the box. Not like all, but give us like 3 fairies that are flip-sided with knights or whatever, so that, and demons and whatever else that this deck might generate as far as tokens goes, so that we can just have them on hand. You open this deck, you can just start playing without having to grab a cracker and be like, okay, this is my knight. So that is what I think about the Alela Artful Provocateur Brawl deck. Let me know what your thoughts were about this deck, if you've had a chance to experience it at all. And if you found this video helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This was Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.